Little did he know, the hands of destiny would deal him an unexpected and treacherous game. Licht was surprised when his entire party was wiped out. Seemed like they had underestimated the monster's strength. Left alone in a tight spot, he had no choice but to hang there. After dodging the monster attack, Licht used his reincarnation spell and resurrected his friends from the dead. After being resurrected, they launched a surprise attack on the monster and instantly killed him. They were happy with the reward after clearing out the bounty quest. Shizuku evenly split and distributed rewards to other party members. She thanked Licht as due to him they were able to handle the quests more efficiently and quickly. Licht was surprised when Shizuku said at first she thought that he was some useless kid before she learned about his skill. Alan turned around, got close to Licht, and said, "You're like the Gandalf of our group. We've got high hopes for you." He thanked his teammates for putting their trust in him. Subsequently, they undertook a multitude of quests, steadily enhancing their strength until they reached a point where Licht was no longer needed. After becoming S-rank party, they were enjoying their meal, but Alan put in another request for his party. The job was to investigate a small temple, and the reward for this job was pretty good. The next day they went out to investigate the shrine. Licht was thinking about something, but Alan and other party members had decided to head back. Surprised by their reaction, Licht only thought something wasn't right. He heard someone's footsteps. He turned around and became surprised as soldiers surrounded him from all directions. He asked the old man and the soldiers about the certain occasion. The old man shows him the execution order which was issued by the kingdom. He was surprised after hearing about his execution order. The guards got closer and apprehended him. He asked him about his crime, as he was working as an adventurer and paying his taxes at the time. The old man said the problem was his skill. Surprised by the old man's reply, he only thought, how did the old man know about his skill? The old man said his skill is way too dangerous to be left alone and it can be misused to revive the demons. Dumbstruck by old man answer, Licht had no intention of misusing his skill. It seemed like the old man was in no mood to listen anything from Licht. He gazed at him and said that if the old man talked to his party members, they would surely back him up. The old man took his suggestion and decided to let him talk to them. He looked at his leader and wanted him to defend against this atrocity. But Alan walks past him like a stranger, and said that he couldn't go against the kingdom's orders, as he wants Licht to sacrifice himself for their gain. Surprised by his answer, he asked what he meant by this. Alan explained in the past they valued his skill quite highly, but after becoming stronger, they don't need him anymore. He and his skill became a burden for the party. After hearing this, he became disheartened. After explanation, Alan went out from there. He looks at Shizuku and Jose and they hold the same opinion as what Alan said. Licht was so surprised that he couldn't even feel the ground under his feet. After watching how his friends betrayed him for some money, he was blindfolded by guards and taken to one of the execution grounds. The executioner removes the blind piece of cloth from his eyes and asks if he has any wish or something. He only asks where is he. He looked in front and saw he was near the edge of the cliff. The executioner tells him he is going to make his death painless by stabbing him in chest and throwing him off from the cliff. When his life was about to end, he shouted that all the people in the empire were the scumbags. Annoyed by his shouting, the executioner said he should be grateful as he could still change the method of his execution into something more tortuous and deadly. Disheartened by the betrayal of his friends, he looked at executioner and said to get it done already. The executioner took his position, stabbed right in his chest and kicked him from the edge of the cliff. As the blood was flowing out from his mouth and chest, he thought, why things turn out like this. After the fall, he crashed on the ground. In his final moments, his life was flashing in front of his eyes. The executioner went back as it was a busy day for him. But is it over, or is it a new beginning for Licht? For a moment it felt like time had stopped flowing in the world. At that time no one makes sure he died or not. His resurrection skill activated and reincarnated him back from the dead. His wounds healed and little by little he got his consciousness back. After he got fully reincarnated from the dead, he was surprised. Why isn't he dead? He thought maybe the executioner had messed up. But he remembered that the executioner had stabbed him. He became surprised as there were no wounds on his body. This phenomenon is similar to his resurrection skill. He thought who could have done it, as he is the only one who could use this skill. The conclusion he drew that his skills got activated when he died. He only thought about his team for a moment, as they didn't knew much about his skill. He put his life and trust in them, but in the end they betrayed him. Saddened and regretted by this, he got on his feet and started to walk out from there. The first thing he wanted to do was to find someplace where he could hide, as he couldn't go back to the kingdom. After escaping from the forest, he ended up close to a seashore. Fortunately, the luck was with him, as the kingdom didn't know about his resurrection. In the past, Licht heard rumors about a hidden dungeon near the border. Left with no other choice, he decided to search for dungeon as his last option. But in the end, there was nothing else than a sea. Frustrated and angered by this, he picks up the rock and throws it at the big stone, as his last hope was nothing more than a fake rumor. When he was about to give up, he suddenly heard an unfamiliar noise. He looked and saw an object which sounded like a metal. On a closer look, it was a metal door. Puzzled by the door out of nowhere, he had decided to investigate. He jumps in the water and gets closer to the metal door. The door opened and it led to some hidden underground passage. Licht's smile grew wider as there is a little hope left for him. He went in and walked to the end of the hidden passage, which led to one of the deepest parts of the dungeon. He thought such a spacious dungeon would be a waste as he didn't encounter any monster on his way. But everything is going to change after resurrecting the demon lord, who is slumbered inside the dungeon depths. To survive on his own, he needs to gather trustworthy and stronger allies. From what he heard, this dungeon existed for a long time and there must be some strong fighters slumber inside the dungeon depths. He used resurrection on the dungeon floor, and sensed an unfamiliar feeling like his soul was being sucked out of his body. The dungeon floor trembled and exploded with a flash which blinded him for some time. After the explosion, he opened his eyes and saw the demon lord and his companions standing in front of him. The demon lord and his companions are overjoyed after being resurrected from death. When they were enjoying their resurrection, Rose looked at Licht and said to the demon lord that he was the same person who had revived them. She looked at him and thought for a moment, then she ordered her retainers to return at their guard post and make sure that no one come near here. She walks closer to Licht and asks him if he was the one who had revived them. He answered yes, and she asked him how he did it, as they had been dead for around a century, and it would be even impossible for a necromancer to do it. He became surprised when he heard about a century and shivered in fear at front of Demon Lord. Seemed like Demon Lord has taken a keen interest in him. He answered that he is also surprised. She looks at Licht one more time and laughs off by saying that he is an interesting one, and asked what he wanted to join them. He asked if it was right for him to join her. She agreed and said he looked like in some sort of trouble. She extended her arm and said to join them as a reward for reviving her. And just like that, he became a member of the Demand Lord army. The scenario was totally different from what he imagined in his mind. He looked and asked about her name. She introduced herself as Arya, also known as the legendary Demon Lord. Licht introduced himself and asked her about the other girls. She answered they are her loyal retainers. Arya looked at her dystopia and decided to rebuild it. He asked did she meant by dungeon. She agreed and said this dungeon goes by another name known as Adventure or Killer Dungeon. Licht asked can he do something to help. Arya smacked him and said don't be stupid. She highly valued his ability and going to assign someone who is perfectly compatible with Licht's ability. He asks her those girls are in charge of guarding this spacious dungeon and asked did Arya noticed something abnormal about those 4 girls. She denied it and said those 4 girls hardly got any time to sleep. He can only sympathize with the girls for their hard work. Arya became confused when Licht said he wanted to take another look at their stationing post. He wanted the Demon Lord to review their stationing positions. She left this task on him and went back to sleep. Licht was only surprised by the legendary Demon Lord's behavior. He started with the area closest to the deepest part of the dungeon. He excused his intrusion. Ferris excused him and went back to work restlessly. He asks him about her busy life, but she replies that the sense of accomplishment is amazing when everything gets back in order. He looked at Ferris and thought being stationed in the deepest part of the dungeon she must have possessed incredible power. He said he came here to investigate her workload and to help her to reduce it. Ferris kneeled and said she would cooperate fully with her hero. He asks her how many areas of the dungeon she is in charge of at this time. Licht was surprised when she replied 5 in total. The lack of manpower in dystopia was more severe issue than he initially thought. She only replies that there is nothing they can do about it. He thought about this issue and decided to fill the empty areas with the traps. She believes that the Demon Lord will listen to him. Ferris clenches her fist and acts like an energetic loli. Licht was surprised and touched by her enthusiasm. He went and met with Tis and Iris in the forest. Tis apologized as she couldn't prepare something for him, but he assured her it's fine. She addressed Licht and he was surprised at how she knew about his name. She said that she heard his conversation with the Demon Lord. Iris called her sister and said that he was going to help them with the current situation. She apologized for making him do this. He said that he came here to relieve everyone's burden. The elf sister's attitude changed when they heard about the word burden. Iris asked her sister what to do with him. She said to hear him out first. He cleared misconceptions from their mind, and asked both of them if they are in charge of this area right. Then he suggested why not to divide the work as one of them can take different area. But Iris replied can't do it because of her sister's complex. She look like a koala who clings to her mother and won't let her go. Furthermore, Tis said they work as a good duo when they are together. Iris looked at her sister and said can't they use him to resurrect the dead servants? He was surprised by the concept of servants. Tis explained there were servants that the demon lord created and they handled odd jobs for them. He said he couldn't revive anyone without their soul. Iris wanted the demon lord to create servants again. He decided to go back and think about how to solve this problem. Iris and her sister wish him all the best. After that, he went to check on Rose. She asked about his visit to the Batcave. He explained that he was investigating the lack of manpower issue in the dungeon. Rose agreed that she and others are having it hard. He asks Rose about the areas that she is taking care of. She answered 7 areas in total. He was dumbstruck by her workaholic attitude. Rose assured him there was nothing to worry about, but it would be a problem if her workload increased any more than this. He only thought it would take time to recruit more workers, and he can't even recruit any ordinary monsters. He got an idea, and decided to resurrect him as every adventurer has heard about the legendary necromancer. Ferris was surprised by the changes in the outside world, but Licht was surprised by the bridge outside the dungeon. She explains that Rose has built it for them. On the other side of the bridge, a wolf was standing in front of them. Ferris said it isn't an enemy and Rose prepared it for their means of transportation. She went close to the wolf and cuddled it and said Licht to get on. After that, they went at the graveyard to resurrect the legendary necromancer. In the graveyard, the guards exchanged conversation with each other and said 2 people are reaching closer to them. They are the grave keepers of the hero graveyard. They have decided to capture and punish them. After Licht and Ferris got closer to the graveyard, they launched a surprise attack on them. Somehow Licht managed to dodge their attack, but Ferris wasn't lucky. Her belly got sliced open by the gravekeeper attack. She felt pain for a moment and died. Licht got closer to check on her, but she got no pulse in her body. Surprised by her death, he heard the gravekeeper scream. The other gravekeeper went to check on him, but it was too late. After a few seconds, the gravekeeper's face became pale and he fell on the ground. Later he was dropped dead in an unknown way. Don't ask how he died. The second gravekeeper looks at Licht and asks what he did to his brother. He understands a little bit about what just happened. He went close to Ferris and made her kick back from the dead with his resurrection spell. She energetically rose again and thanked him for resurrecting her. She walked closer to the second gravekeeper. Gravekeeper got so scared that he saw a ghost out of her. She looked at him and laughed like a psychopath. She took the gravekeeper dagger and cut her neck. By surprise, the second gravekeeper died with her. Licht went again and used his resurrection skill on her. She woke up like nothing had happened. He had decided to go and finish the missions before the reinforcement arrived. They went inside and reached close to her tombstone. Licht looked at the legendary necromancer's tomb, and used his resurrection skill on her. Suddenly a hand popped out from the tomb. Seemed like she got stuck and needed help. They help her out. Dorothy came out and scolded them to dig out her corpse first before resurrecting her. After a little while she forgives them as a reward for resurrecting her. She asked Licht about the reason for resurrecting her. He cut to the chase and offered her to become his companion. She looked at Ferris in surprise, and asked about her. Before they move out, she looks at Licht and asks what method did he use as a necromancer to resurrect her. He answered that he had used resurrection on her. She was surprised as she never heard about resurrection skills before. She agreed and decided to become their companion. Licht expressed his gratitude and decided to go back before reinforcement arrived. Dorothy was surprised by the dystopia size, as it would take quite a number of spirits to cover the entire dungeon. He became disappointed as it was tricky to pull it off. She answered nonsense, which idiot told him that because enslaving a large number of spirits is her specialty. She raised her staff and acted like a movie model when casting her magic, and she was done. Licht was surprised with her speed and asked if she had done it already. She said after 3 minutes this dungeon would be crawling out with 100 spirits at once. She requested him to use one of the areas as she wanted right. She asked Licht as a human why he was working with the demon lord. He said he had encountered some issues in the past and couldn't go back to the kingdom. She became sad and decided to stop digging out any further. But she concluded that things didn't go well for Licht in the human world. Speaking of which, she decides to go and greet the demon lord as a newcomer. He said she didn't have to worry about the demon lord as she would be sleeping right now, and it would be better for Dorothy to go and greet her comrades. She was surprised when found out Ferris was a scary person, but she didn't find it scary at all. He explained if anyone attacked her she would slit her throat to kill that person. Dorothy had decided to go and greet her comrades and she wanted him to come for her aid if anything happened. He assured her there was nothing to worry about and he would resurrect him. Meanwhile, back in the kingdom, Alan was sitting on the desk and thinking about something. Shizuka came and asked did he find Licht's replacement, but he said not yet as no one matched their level. Shizuku suggested letting one person join the party so they could use them for a decoy. They have decided to take their time to find the best applicant for their party. She looked at one of the letter and it was addressed to their party leader. He thought that it would be another request from applicant party to let him join their party. But it was a request from the Guild for Dungeon Investigation, and the reward for this request was 5,000 gold coins. Surprised by the huge reward, they have no choice but to accept it. Meanwhile, Licht was helping Dorothy in her accommodation. He was surprised as things were so quiet and nothing happened at all. Dorothy breaks the news as it appears that humans have become aware of the dungeon. Licht became dumbfounded by her news. She explained that one of her spirits spotted the humans near the dungeon while patrolling the area and they had already noticed the dungeon's existence. He thanked her for the information and said that her comrades were happy for the spirits she had provided them. She asked what should she do when the fight started. Did she have to fight alongside them? Demon Lord came and interrupted their conversation, and said she was looking for both of them. Dorothy greeted the Demon Lord. Demon's Lord returned her greeting and said to keep up the good work as she is looking forward to it. He told Arya about the upcoming human attack on the dungeon. She eagerly clenched her fist to grant them death wish, but it seems like her wish won't be granted as Rose and Iris will take care of them. He asked if Rose and Iris are really that strong. She explained Iris is only strong when she is with her sister, but Rose on the other hand is stronger and would devour every human on her way. Dorothy shivered in fear. She only felt pity for humans. The Demon Lord went back as it was a particularly busy day for her. Licht was only thinking something about Arya. Dorothy called him and said she was amazed as he could talk casually with Arya, as she is genuine Demon Lord. Meanwhile, Alan and her party were getting closer to the dungeon. Jose looks at Alan and asks him, are they heading in the right direction? He said that they are moving in the right direction. Jose asks him about the countermeasure and the plan, but he replied there's no plan and he assured him that they don't need one. They look at dungeon entrance and the underground tunnel. Alan warns them to stay on guard as they can't afford to die. After that, they went inside the dungeon. Jose was surprised by the amount of danger he was sensing. He detected a high level of undead in the dungeon. Alan has decided to kill them as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Licht was helping Dorothy in setting up her room. She thanked Licht for his help, and said these spirits can't help with this kind of stuff. It reminded Licht about the spirit who informed them about the humans. Meanwhile, when he was thinking about this, Dorothy called him and said she got a report that humans entered the dystopia. He was surprised by her report. Meanwhile, Alan's party was surrounded by thousands of dead spirits. He asked Jose if he was sure that it was done by a monster. He agreed and said it looked like the work of the 10 liches. Alan had decided to kill all of them. Before he can finish giving instructions to his party, something happened around him. He heard someone's voice from behind him. Rose greeted him and said she was given an order to split his group. He was surprised by Rose's sudden entrance and said who is she? She introduced herself and said her name was Rose. He had a bad feeling about this. He drew his sword and attacked her, but became surprised when his sword went missing from his hand. Rose looked at his sword and complimented it and said it is being wasted on human scum like him. Surprised, he asked how she took his sword away from him. She said his swings were too slow for her, so she borrowed it to take a look. After that, she tosses it back to him. He asked her about the dungeon owner and who is controlling all the spirits. Rose said she didn't know the exact location, but she was with Licht. Alan was surprised by hearing his name and asked how did she know him. She said that's what she is going to ask. Sometime later she gets what just happened. Alan smirks and ignorantly points his blade toward Rose. But the battle already got over as the bats suck blood out of him. He tries to shake them off, but it's too late as his entire body get paralyzed. Rose thought about how to get much more blood out of him. Because it's not enough for her, she had an idea that she is going to ask Licht to resurrect him so she can have more blood out of her body. She had decided to test this out theory, while later Alan found himself in a coffin covered with bats sucking blood out of him. And his life ended up like this. After wandering around, Shizuku went inside the deepest area of the dungeon. When she was wandering, she heard someone's voice and looked in front of her. It was Iris and her elder sister. She blushed while looking at them. Elf sisters have decided to kill her as it was an order from Mausama. Shizuki tries to play brave in front of elf sisters. She thought for a moment that it would work, but Iris used her skill spirit control and summoned countless spirits for battle. Shizuka tries to fight back. She holds for a little time but can't hold much longer as one of the spirits gets inside her body. Her body suddenly became paralyzed, making her like a statue. Iris was happy and wanted Tis to praise her more for her success. Her elder sister also used spirit control and paralyzed her body twice. After getting affected by paralysis, she wanted to do something to escape from there. Iris asked her elder sister what to do with her and she suggested handing her over to Rose. Shizuku got a bad feeling from the elf sister's smile. Meanwhile, in the man hall, Jose was surrounded by countless dead spirits. He heard someone's voice and it was Dorothy. Jose felt that he had seen her face somewhere before. He wanted to ask some questions from her. She apologized and said she couldn't answer any of them, but assured him that he wouldn't suffer like his other two friends. Jose drew her blade out and got ready for battle, but at that time Licht entered the main hall. Jose is surprised by seeing him alive and asks how is he even alive. He further asked what he's even doing here. He asks the same thing, Jose. In surprise, he asked didn't he get executed. Licht replied yes and said he was brought back to life by his skill. Then he asks Jose if he is here, then it means that Alan would also be here. Jose replied that he wanted to know it too, but he got split with them. He asked Jose did he knew about his execution. He replied I did. He asked about his reaction and he said that our party won't remain strong anymore. He wasn't surprised by his answer. Jose repeated his question and asked how is he still alive, but Licht replied that he was alive by his skill and he also resurrected the demon lord with his army. Surprised by his answer, Jose said that he had committed a serious crime and his name would pass in the history as a criminal. He said once the king knew about this crime he would come at him at full force. He only said to bring it on. Jose drew his blade with escape items and decided to escape and report this to the king. Dorothy commanded Death Spirit to attack him. He used the escape item and ran away by using smoke to his advantage. Instead of escaping from the dungeon, he ended up in some other area of the dungeon. He looked around his surroundings and there wasn't any undead in the area. But Ferris approached there and greeted him. He once again drew his blade and sliced her up. She died again. Jose calmed down a little bit, but sometime later he died from his own attack. Meanwhile, back in the kingdom, one of the king's retainers informs him that the communication with the adventurers has completely cut off, and it is safe to assume that all of them are dead. His retainer suggested creating allies with the neighboring countries to take down this danger. The king took his suggestion and decided to make preparations for it. Arya whispered that it isn't good. Licht asked her what seemed to trouble her. She said that she must have noticed, didn't he, but he had no idea what is she even talking about. She explains that we have been eating the same thing for the past few days. He supposes that it's inevitable and they can't do anything about this. He asks the demon lord about her cooking skills. Can she cook? But she got a great idea thanks to him. In advance, he asked her not to tell him to resurrect any dead chef and she replied no. She decided to join forces with the other races to recruit chefs and discover new food resources. He asked like barter with others. She said just leave it to me, as the abundance of jewels and weapons stored in the dungeon. She had decided to recruit elves and dragonkin. Dragonkin for weapons tunings and repairs and the elves for their food and chefs. She laughed evilly and had something else in her mind.